So this talk really follows on with the technology that Timo introduced, and really follows the spirit of social marketing. So we're going to talk about a technique, a tool. So we're diving from Alan's big picture to really small and specific technique, but a really neat one that actually is reasonable value for money and simple to use. So I thought I'll share that. And I really created the idea of using that technique to tell you about it in the social marketing context to Sharon and Christoph, who a couple of years ago invited me to be part of the book they put together, which is formative research in social marketing. And what I really like about this idea and why I was so excited is that the purpose of that book was to actually expand the portfolio, if you like, or the arsenal of tools that social marketers can use to understand and track behavior change. And really, this is what this is about, is to expand your horizons in terms of really think beyond just the surveys and those notorious focus groups we all heard about yesterday. So definitely a lot of credit goes to my fabulous collaborator here, Dr. Bill Page. He is the geek behind it, the IT guru. I'm really coming in as a user, and as the role goes, I really challenge his patience in being low-tech generally. So he had to spell it out for me and break it down. And then together we translated what is a high-tech solution into what can be a very simple to use and kind of friendly technique. So first question is really, why track behavior change? And I probably don't need to tell you here in this audience too much about it, but really, you know, the biggest reason why we all think about it is after we're doing, or when we're planning intervention or campaign, however you call it, we need to know how we succeeded. Does this stuff actually work that we've just introduced? And that's important, and of course it's probably the main driver for everyone in research and actually practitioners to think about measuring behavior and tracking. But also I really think, again, in the spirit of that book, there's a lot of something's clicking here. There is a lot of need in the formative stage of research to track behavior, because the things you could really understand is, first of all, what the problem is. And we've heard about this rabbit and the dog story yesterday. So often you don't know what the problem is until you actually observe the behavior in a lengthy period of time. So that's important. Another is actually identifying trends over time. And that's possible right now. There's no problem, but you can look in the future and go, oh my God, in 10 years' time, we will run out of certain things. We will run out of resources or opportunities. So tracking is also important. And like I said, again, just measuring whether something actually happened. So most of you familiar with the ways how we track behavior, and I'd probably say that it's fair to say that for majority of us, survey methods or probably most common. So we would, let's call it for what it is. It's a self-reported by participants behavior. So in the survey, people have to tell you what they've been doing. So I'm just going to park for a moment. I'm actually a researcher that uses all techniques, qualitative, quantitative, mechanical researcher, all of it. And because they all have place in different roles. So we do need to understand awareness. Surveys have place because there's no way to ask why questions unless you actually talk to the person. So I'll just park this for now, but if we just focus on the role in the surveys when we ask people to report the behavior, what they're actually doing, it has certain problems with that, and I'll mention in the next slide. So another way we track is actually using a highly qualified and paid researchers to really observe behavior. And while it probably observations have better reliability because we have ways of observing rather than relying on participants reporting it, it still has obviously a lot of problems. And then the final one is mechanical observation. So for simplicity, the simple definition here would be just using some sort of mechanical way, technological way to observe the behavior, often on an ongoing basis. So I've started unraveling some of the problems, and I'm sure most of you are aware, but I think it's useful to remind ourselves of the limitations of the tools that are at our disposal. So self-reports. The first problem is really lack of noticing what people really do. So in the vast majority of challenges we face in the social marketing space is often about habitual behaviors. So behaviors that people actually do on almost an autopilot, or almost in a way that they do it all the time. What that means is that they're no longer actually noticing. So if I ask you how many minutes exactly, did you spend having breakfast this morning, probably you're unlikely. Or, I mean, you might recall what exactly you had for breakfast, but then, some of my colleagues in the health, and I do a lot of cross-disciplinary work with health colleagues, they have those extensive protocols for asking people, what did you eat today? What did you eat yesterday? I mean, there's a real limitations to how much people can actually recall simply because of noticing. A lot of my work is happening in supermarkets because I'm interested in food choices, and then this is the space where we develop a lot of industry collaboration and opportunities. And from that data, we know that it takes a few seconds to make food choice decisions, and off they go. So in this, and then also we know that about 2/3 of people who come to a supermarket to do grocery shopping actually come with a kind of preset list and plan, which means that it's a very routinely habitual decisions, which means if you're being asked about them, chances are you might not actually really remember and notice what you were doing. The second problem is memory lapse. So we're all probably familiar with the picture of a leaky bucket. That's what our memory looks like. So it's actually a very common assumption that we think if something, even lived-in experience happened, that we will actually be able to recall it. Unfortunately, that definitely is not the case. And it's even more dangerous in terms of not just that where a person would honestly in an interview tell you, I honestly do not remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, or how many or how long I've been exercising for, or how many times I've exercised in the last week. They would try to help you in an interview and they will come up with an answer. And that answer is more likely, there's things like telescoping. So telescoping is that memory just changes, and people believe that events happen probably more recently than they are, or more frequently if these are the behaviors that they think they should be doing. So for example, they might say that I've exercised 5 times or 4 times. It might actually be 3. So that's another real problem in that data. We all here talking about issues that any journalist out there would think this is the good thing to do. What this means is that in the minds of consumers, these are socially desirable things. So when we interview people about it, and again, and we have done in the Institute a lot of work in terms of those biases, how they differ in the method of data collection. So definitely there's a bias if you have a human, like if it's a face-to-face versus if it's on the phone versus if it's online. So the less personal it is, the less of the social desirability bias, but it's still there. Absolutely still there. So if we're asking people for things that they think they should be doing, chances are they will be overclaiming those things. And finally, I'm sure we all again aware the selection bias. Just the fact that we have a sample is not a census. So a census is when we have opportunity for the government money to ask every single person. A sample is a sample we're picking, and very often we need to be memorable. Just remember that actually people who agree to participate in a survey, chances are in some way different from those who just refuse to participate or not interested, and most likely it's because of the interest in a topic. And again, the interest in the topic goes back to social desirability bias. So this is just a quick summary of all the problems with self-report challenges. So one way to overcome that is, instead of asking people, to observe what they do. So I'm a big fan of observation techniques because I'm a big fan of actually using behavior as a tracking mechanism of how we achieved anything in what we're trying to do. So one way of doing it is researchers get together, train each other, or develop a protocol. And we've done a lot of work in terms of actually trying to make sure that there is certain objectivity. And then definitely there's more objectivity than all what I've listed above of the problems. But at the same time, I've mentioned labor cost is ridiculous. And believe me, I've done it so many times. And I did spend a lot of money on, because you pay for hour of researcher time. And because of the labor cost, of course, you have only limited times of observation. So if there are, like we've done in the supermarkets, if there are differences in weekdays versus weekends, you have to have a sample of those days to represent. But once you start, something happens, weather changes the, traffic patterns and behavior of people. So it's very hard, unless you have a very long observation, which you often can't afford with people. These are the limitations. So what the solution might be, one of those solutions is really using some sort of mechanical observation or some sort of technology. First and foremost, the machines don't get tired, and they don't, some of them, let's just say some of them, don't cost as much as humans per hour, particularly of associate professor time. So definitely they're free from self-report biases and all the biases I've mentioned. They do capture non-verbal data, which I find personally in my work really valuable, because people often don't notice that this is how they do things. And when you actually see them, they go, "Ooh," and they wouldn't even realize that this is how they perform, like that they often pick this type of trolley versus that type of trolley, or they actually go, to the, candy aisle first, and then they actually do this other things. So they don't realize when it's habitual. Definitely long observations, and most importantly, and I think for all of us, getting ethics approval of different nature and complexities. These are non-invasive, these are anonymous and real-time data collection. So these are the benefits in terms of you actually not compromising privacy of people. They're de-identified, but you get the volume of it, so you get the statistics. And today I really wanted just to give you an example of one particular technique we're using, and it's the one that I really like because of its simplicity and reasonably low cost. So we're talking about a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi tracker. And what I'd like you to do now is, let's just first, can we have put your hand up if you have a smartphone with you right now? All right, 100% basically. All right. Can you put your hand up if you think that on your phone you have a Bluetooth function on? All right, well, actually, that's about 80% of thinkers. What about Wi-Fi? Do you think you have Wi-Fi? Yeah. That's, again, pretty much everyone in the room. And the reason we have those functions on, because they're actually very, very, very useful. So I'm not going to ask you to check, but if you want to check, you can actually go into settings. And really, if you're interested, as I'm talking, you can double check whether you're right or wrong. But the reason we have these things on is because free Wi-Fi is important to most of us when we get to any place. Because, I was trying to make an urgent Skype call yesterday, and I couldn't because I couldn't connect to Wi-Fi, and there was a disaster, and I was running around. So, and also because a lot of other technologies around us actually use the same protocol. So Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is basically communication protocols between devices. So this was a very old data, 2014. We did mole intercept interview where we actually asked people to have a look at their phones. And that back then, that's 4 years ago, we had 2/3 had Wi-Fi and 1/3 Bluetooth. Since then, how many of you have some sort of fitness trackers devices? All right, well, they also use Bluetooth, so that means that's why you have Bluetooth on, because they talk to your phone. Similarly, in the cars, your speakers and then your systems now talk to your phone also using Bluetooth device. So basically, nowadays, I would guess the vast majority would have those things on. So what does it mean for using that opportunity? That basically, and that's the wonderful slide that Bill tried to explain to me. So in a very simplistic way, it is a protocol for communication between devices. So your phone that is on you and some other device that cannot receive those signals. So your phone goes around with varying frequency, sending around signals and checking who's around, who's there, do I need to be connected to something? So there is an opportunity for the other device to basically pick it up and identify. And what is very important here is that each device has a unique MAC address. MAC address is a technical term. It has nothing to do with Apple products, but it's a unique ID that says this unique device has entered the zone and then it left the zone. And what this really means is this is what we can get in terms of useful data. So we have a time of entry, we have of that unique ID person, have time of exit, the mathematical simple form, duration, so when they came, when they left, and then we also know how many unique consumers came in this particular zone. So for those of you interested in technical, we've done validation of this technique, again, in that study that was done in the supermarket. So the blue line is the basically a distribution of the trip length in that supermarket that we picked using the Bluetooth technology. And the red one we did really old school manually. We tapped every fifth person, so systematic sampling, as they're entering a supermarket, give them a little handwritten stick and say, if you just hold on to the sticker with the time on it, and if you return it to us once you finish shopping, as you walk out, you get a free chocolate bar. Sorry, it was a chocolate bar at the time. Now we offer fruit or chocolate bar option, but it was chocolate bar at the time. And basically we tracked over 300 people that way. So we had an objective measure of exactly the time they took. And then we also looked at where their phone settings were. And the results are remarkably similar. So we validated that technique, meaning that it actually measures what it does. Now, I always get asked in this talk, what are the biases in terms of demographic? Yes, absolutely right. So people over 65 were underrepresented in the sample, and most likely they actually did not own a smartphone at the time, and that was 2014. So if they still had old Nokias, they would have died by now. So even an old lady by now for security would probably have an iPhone. So just as a comment. So what does it mean for using that neat little thing for behavior change? So definitely a lot of my work in supermarkets we have done. So you get a lot of information about traffic flow. So during the day, when is the busy times, underused times, lengths of stay. So this applies to any service scape, any environment you might want. So you know how long people were spending on the premises, essentially, which could be very useful. You know if it changes throughout the week, throughout the daytime, so you can actually plan the service delivery and stuff around that. And the next generation. So generally these things, in terms of the areas of the old versions were about 15 meters of actually, getting. So we put it one in the supermarket, and that just covers entrance and all the checkouts. So nowadays, you can get a smaller range, and smaller range allow you to actually put in different areas. So even like with a large supermarket, you can actually say what's the traffic flow in a smaller fruit and veg versus, candy aisle. My new big love, outdoor advertising. This thing, and Bill has done work on that, he basically used the same technology to track exactly how many opportunities to see a billboard of advertising could actually attract. And that's really neat, because if we are spending a particular amount of money on your message or hiring a particular billboard, you want to know what the return on investment is or what opportunity. So I really like this one. This was from Singapore. I just saw it, and it says, "Too bad you can't scroll this ad away." And I really like that idea. And the second one said, "I don't have any followers, just 3 million readers every day." So when we talk about the clutter and confusion of social media, you walk going, duh, they're right, absolutely right. It sits right there, and it does. And as you walk, this was one of the underground, sort of tunnels they have in the area, and you know that when you're walking, you have nothing better to do than to read what says on the damn thing. So I really now starting to believe there's it's underused, that outdoor space, particularly if location is important. We're now talking to our retail partners in terms of rather than just general, umbrella at the time, you can actually say, supermarket 300 that way. And that actually, it's call for action as well as the message. Many of you are running events, and it's very hard to estimate attendance in events unless you have lengthy registrations or pre-registrations, and so it's hard to actually estimate. And there are some models that take a photo and then you can have geolocation or something on there, but a Bluetooth technique, a Wi-Fi technique tracking could actually do just that as well, and then that gives you an objective way of actually measuring participation in the event that you organized. Another one is usage of different facilities. We know councils obviously are interested in tracking if they've invested in the infrastructure, bike racks, playgrounds, drinking fountains, how many people actually use it. Is this being used, and can we report its effectiveness? And I want to finish on certainly the caveat, because as any tool, there are strengths and weaknesses of it. Definitely the limitation in this case is this is an opportunity to do something. We cannot guarantee that people actually undertook the behavior you wanted. We know that they were in the area and they had opportunity to drink from a fountain, they had opportunity to play on the ground, they had opportunity to see something like a billboard. It's not guaranteed that they actually did that. So that's an important limitation. Some of the duplicates could be complex because while it's a unique address, if you return, in some devices, it's not permanently attached to your phone. So if you come back to the same place in the same day, you will be counted as a new person. So it's one of those technical limitations. And most importantly, like I said at the very beginning, it's one of the tools. It's not the only, it's not a holy grail, it's not a one-off solution. It is actually, it doesn't tell you who or why, it just tells you the numbers and the patterns. So I really advocate for complementing. So use this in your toolkit as one of objective ways to track large volume of behavior changes, but definitely complement with other things that actually help you to explain what the problem is or why people doing certain things. And that's me.